The San Antonio Spurs are a professional basketball team based in San Antonio, Texas. It competes in the National Basketball Association (NBA) as a member of the Southwest Division of the Western Conference. The team was founded in 1967 as the Dallas Chaparrals of the American Basketball Association (ABA) before moving to San Antonio in 1973 and joining the NBA. He has 5 league championships under his belt, and names like David Robinson, Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili are some of the great players who have played in his ranks. Beginnings in the city of Dallas. In the beginning, the current Spurs were called the Dallas Chaparrals and played in the ABA. In 1967, the Chaparrals were one of 11 teams competing in the ABA season. After the first seasons, the public in the city of Dallas lost interest in basketball and attendance at the arena decreased season after season. For this reason, the owners changed the name from Dallas to Texas with the aim of attracting a more regional audience, but no positive results were obtained. This, and having been left out of the playoffs in 1972, caused the club to be put up for sale. A group of businessmen from the city of San Antonio took the step and became the new owners of the franchise. They renamed the team Spurs and converted the blue, red and white of the Chaparrals into the traditional silver and black that we all associate with the San Antonio team. That team was led by James Silas and Swinator, and with the season halfway through, future Hall of Fame member George Gervin arrives to reinforce the franchise. After a good regular season, they fall in the playoffs against the Indiana Pacers. The following year the same story would be repeated. The Pacers became the bedrock of the Spurs. In the 1975-1976 campaign, the last of the ABA, the Spurs were eliminated in the postseason for the third consecutive year against the New York Nets on this occasion. In 1976, the league dissolved and left the San Antonio franchise without any competition to play in, but the NBA decided to admit the Spurs that same year, along with the Pacers, Nuggets and Nets. The era begins in the NBA in those years. Within the NBA there were several voices that doubted the level that teams from the ABA could show. The Spurs decided to silence those voices from the first moment, and finished their first season in the league with a surprising record of 44-38, but were eliminated against the Celtics. The following 2 years, the San Antonio franchise had good regular seasons, but the Bullets deprived them of fighting for the NBA ring twice in a row. Still, the Spurs won 5 division titles in their first 7 years in the league and were a playoff team season after season. The 1980s were marked by moments of brightness and darkness within the San Antonio franchise. In the first years, the Spurs managed to maintain the competitiveness of years ago and had several seasons with a positive record, but without winning any NBA ring. In the 1984-1985 campaign there was a change within the team. George Gervin was traded to the Houston Rockets, and with him a great first stage for the Spurs in the league ended. Years of transition in San Antonio after the departure of their franchise player, the team suffered in the following years. Losing so many games and the loss of interest on the part of the fans made them seriously consider moving the franchise to another city in the country. But when the Spurs needed it most, a shot of energy arrived to boost the morale of the owners and fans. The number 1 pick in the 1987 draft fell into the hands of the Texas team, selecting David Robinson. As the center served in the United States Navy, he could not be used by the San Antonio Spurs until 1989. Until that moment, the biggest attraction for the fans who came to the Hemisphere Arena was Alvin Robertson, the 1.93-point guard who managed to lead the league in steals for 3 seasons, and was voted best defender in the NBA in the 1985-1986 season. David Robinson, X-Factor led by the Florida player and a young Sean Elliott, the Spurs faced the new decade with great optimism. Season after season they were regulars in the playoffs, but they failed to take that step forward that would place them with the best. For this reason, McCombs, owner of the franchise, fired Brown as coach of the Spurs, leaving men like Bob Bass, Jerry Tarkanian and John Lucas on the team's bench. After several years falling in the first rounds of the playoffs, Lucas was immediately fired in the 1993-1994 season and replaced for the following season by Bob Hill. Sean Elliott was traded to the Pistons for a young rebounder named Dennis Rodman. A year later, Elliott would return to the black and silver team after an inconsistent season in Detroit, and the team finished with a 62-20 record. David Robinson became MVP after a brilliant season. The Spurs reached the conference finals, but the Rockets knocked them out of what would have been the first final for the Texas franchise. Rodman would leave the team's discipline that same summer, after a season with constant friction with all his teammates. 1995 to 1996 was another good season for the Spurs, but they failed again in the postseason against the Jazz, although no one expected that the following season would be the worst in history up to that point. The serious injury kept Robinson off the track all year, and the team coached by Hill seriously blamed him for that. A 20-62 record landed Greg Popovich on the San Antonio bench. Duncan and Robinson, the tall couple having in one of the worst teams in the entire competition, gave the Spurs the advantage of taking number 1 in the 1997 draft. Tim Duncan was selected by the franchise from Wake Forest and would soon become a great star of the NBA. He was chosen as Rookie of the Year, but San Antonio ran into Malone and Stockton's Jazz again in the playoffs. In 1998 to 1999, the Spurs had very high expectations to go far in the fight for the ring, but the league was delayed a few months due to a lockout and the number of games had to be reduced to 50. Even so, the team finished with a 37-13 record and crushed the playoffs to reach the finals with an 11-1 run. There they would meet the New York Knicks, beating them in 5 games and winning the first NBA ring in their history. In the following 3 years, the Spurs continued with practically the same block of players who won the title, but they would be dropped by the Suns and Lakers, the latter in 2 consecutive seasons. The famous Big Three, the 2002-2003 campaign, was a very exciting one for the franchise for 2 reasons. It would be David Robinson's last season as a professional, and on the other hand they were opening a new pavilion, the SBC Center. This was a quite different team from previous years, with new faces such as the Frenchman Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili or Steve Kerr. They ended up winning 60 games in the regular season and reached the NBA Finals against the New Jersey Nets. The San Antonio Spurs won the series 4-2 and won the second ring since its founding. An excellent Tim Duncan was named MVP of the season and also of the finals. The following year, and without David Robinson on the team, the Spurs had another great season but were defeated by the Los Angeles Lakers in the conference semifinals. This did not diminish the morale of the San Antonio team, and just a year later they would make history again. After eliminating the Nuggets, Supersonics and Suns in the postseason, the Detroit Pistons awaited them in the fight for their 3rd NBA ring. The Spurs took the series by a tight 4-3 with a great performance by Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili. The franchise from the city of San Antonio seemed unstoppable year after year, but in 2005 to 2006 the Dallas Mavericks brought Popovich's men back to reality, eliminating them in the Western Conference semifinals. Luckily, the franchise quickly recovered from the hard blow, and in the following season they would remove that thorn with a new ring, the 4th. After finishing with a record of 58-24, the Spurs swept the Nuggets, Suns and Jazz to face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the last step for the title. The series ended 4-0, but Cleveland made things difficult in every game, even if the result did not reflect it. After these years of success, the franchise continued to qualify for the playoffs, but injuries began to take their toll on San Antonio's ranks. In the 2012-2013 season they managed to reach the NBA Finals again, but they met the Miami Heat of LeBron, Wade and Bosh and fell 4-3. New title and reconstruction in 2013-2014, the Spurs maintained the base of the team that had given the franchise so much success recently, but with the added bonus of an excellent shooter like Marco Bellinelli and a young man who was already standing out like Kawhi Leonard. After having another great regular season, in the postseason they got rid of great teams like Durant and Westbrook, among others. Life always gives second chances, and for the Spurs it was not going to be any less. The Miami Heat were waiting again in the NBA Finals. This time LeBron James and company couldn't do anything. The defense and passing of Greg Popovich's boys destroyed the Heat, who could only win 1 game in the series. Kawhi Leonard was named MVP of the finals and reaffirmed himself as a great star in the league. Over the next 5 seasons, with Duncan's retirement and Parker and Ginobili at the end of their careers, the team underwent a rebuild year after year. This does not stop the Spurs from going to the playoffs for the title with Leonard as the top stiletto. In the summer of 2018, the franchise is forced to make one of the most important moves in the league in recent years. Leonard was traded to the Raptors in exchange for DeMar DeRozan. In the end, Kawhi led the Toronto Raptors that became NBA champions.